Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the CR Sports Podcast. And Garrett, I guess that's a new mark for the CR Sports Podcast. Season 6, now officially out after the end of the NFL season.
Yeah, end of the Super Bowl. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. Not many people wanted to see them win, but they were the champions regardless. It was one of the best Super Bowls we've had in a long time, though. Very entertaining.
Instant classic.
Even though I did want the 49ers, but it started off very slow in the first half. Not a lot of offense, but it picked up towards the end. And now we turn our focus to college basketball as March Madness is just about a month away.
Yeah, the Chiefs are back-to-back champs. Two out of the past 3 years, Super Bowl champions. And three out of the past four. It's just really impressive. It's been fun to watch. I think you got to enjoy it because you see all these football fans now where they're like, "We want Tom Brady back. We want Tom Brady to take out Mahomes. We want Brady. We didn't appreciate him." And he was the most hated player of like all time when he was in the league, and everyone kind of forgot about that. So I think just it's important to note that when you're watching greatness, even if it's not your team, most likely it's not going to be just the odds of it. But you got to appreciate it somehow.
Yeah, and I think the race for Mahomes to catch Brady is sort of officially on. Mahomes seems to be the second greatest quarterback of all time now.
I agree.
I think it's just a matter of time before he's able to catch Brady, especially if he plays as long as Brady did to age 45.
Let's say this. Let's say he just plays till 40. He's 28 right now. He has 12 more seasons. And Brady won 7 Super Bowls. You don't see Mahomes winning 3 or 4 more Super Bowls in the next 12 years. I don't know. Just right now, it feels like that would happen.
Yeah, Mahomes is definitely cementing his legacy as well as plenty of other Chiefs players. Travis Kelce, the way he stepped up, certainly going to be in the conversation for the best tight end of all time. And Andy Reid, he had a lot of success in Philly, but no Super Bowls, and he's been able to capitalize as well.
Yeah, it was a great celebration for the Chiefs. The only thing that is kind of sour coming away from that is obviously the Super Bowl parade in which there was people that took advantage of that moment and then just caused harm to others, resulting in a death of somebody and kids being hospitalized. It just kind of puts a damper on the Super Bowl celebration for the Chiefs, but it also puts perspective into things of what really matters in life, and that even though sports is really fun to watch, it's not the end-all be-all, and when it's people's lives involved, it's pretty sad what happened there, and people forget about the Super Bowl championship real fast.
Yeah, it was certainly just really hard to see. Obviously, something you want to see be avoided with future parades for the championship team. Glad to see that it was only one person who lost their life, and when I think it was either a couple people even tackled one of the suspects involved. So hopefully we can avoid stuff like that in the future. Like you mentioned, it's just a lot of people are trying to rally around their team, and all it takes is one person to realize that there's a situation that they can make stuff happen, and I guess that's what they decided to do.
Yeah, so that's really unfortunate. Our prayers go out to those people with involved, and we'll move on to college basketball now. As it is season 6, we obviously, if in case you're just watching the Sierra Sports Podcast, the way we've broken this up, there's no real formula to it. We've just said, hey, there's different sports seasons going involved with it. So football season, we're like, all right, this is season 1. Then season 2 is like the college basketball season after football season. Then 3, we were just getting into things, and then 4 over the summer, dog days, start up 5 again for football, and now we're at 6. So it's been fun. It's been interesting. It's been a ride, and now it's season 6. The Sierra Sports Podcast will obviously continue, but this college basketball season, Garrett, it's happening. It's getting interesting. It's getting fun. Ohio State with a huge upset today over Purdue, but I know you want to talk about the bracket preview that we all saw with the top 16 teams.
Yeah, the committee released their annual bracket preview of 16 teams. They do a month out before actual March Madness, and there wasn't a ton of surprise here, I don't think. I think we saw the brand names getting a lot of recognition with Kansas being lined up as a 2 and Duke as a 3. But as for the 4-1 seeds, Purdue, UConn, Houston, Arizona, the committee pretty much signaled that these feel like the 4 number 1 seeds we're going to see in the tournament. Arizona doesn't have much of a challenge in the Pac-12 this year, so I think their 1 seed's pretty locked up. UConn looks like far and away the best team right now, especially after their dismantling of Marquette yesterday. And I know Purdue lost to Ohio State, but they seem pretty safe in that Midwest region. Still only 3 losses. And then Houston got off to a rocky start. Started 1 and 2 in the Big 12, but they've really gotten it back together. And since their only losses in Allen Fieldhouse, which is such a tough place to play. So I think all 4 of the 1 seeds are pretty set in stone. As for the 2 seeds, we could see Marquette maybe slip a little bit farther back than expected after losing by 28 points in UConn. Obviously, such a tough place to play against probably the hottest team in the country. And then North Carolina, the other 2 seed, they had a rough one earlier this week in the JMA Wireless Dome, dropping one to Syracuse. But I think the committee realizes that's a tough place to play, and they're going to keep them staying pat at number 2. And then Tennessee, Dolan Connect has done such a good job finally giving this Volunteers offense a boost to go with that defense that we know Rick Barnes is going to have playing well at the right time. And lastly, Kansas, who struggled recently, has some tough games away from Allen Fieldhouse that they've lost, but they're still undefeated at home. And I think the brand Kansas really plummets them into the 2 spot.
Yeah, so Carolina also has been struggling. They struggled with Clemson as well, and then Syracuse happened. But I think the real big takeaway is in the 2 seeds. You see Marquette, who just got destroyed by Connecticut, and Connecticut, who's obviously the defending champions from last year. I don't know. That makes me look at Connecticut and just be like, they are. I think they're the favorite again. They're the powerhouse, and you know there's good teams, and especially if that was their bracket, because we're looking at the bracket right here. You see Connecticut and North Carolina in there. That could make up for a really great Elite Eight matchup. But then again, we forget about what it really is. It's the madness. It's March. It's crazy. And all these upsets tend to happen. Last year we saw FDU, a 16 seed, go to the Sweet 16. So a lot of things can happen. It gets wild that just because we see this bracket preview, by no means is that what it's going to be like in the Sweet 16. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, we're still far away. Obviously, it's like the college football playoff first release. It's never probably will never be the exact same from the first release to the final one.
I think Connecticut is cemented at the 1 though.
But I think UConn has pretty much clinched their spot at a 1, and I think Houston and Arizona should be pretty safe. It would take a couple more losses for Purdue for them to slip. But to me,
they lost to a bad Ohio State team though today.
Yeah, Ohio State playing with a lot of fire though after Chris Holtmann got fired, a game at home. That's just it's a tough place to play in Ohio State. You know that team had a lot of sort of a chip on their shoulder after their coach got fired. But the main difference I felt like we saw last year was just all the plurality going on in college basketball. We really thought for the first time in a while there wasn't one best team or 2 or 3 best teams, and it made for a really exciting March Madness. And this year, it felt like we were starting to get that, and now it feels like UConn has separated themselves, and then it's everyone else.
And UConn separated themselves in the tournament last year as well. They were dominant. They were amazing. They were great. And even though they lost guys like Adama Sanogo, who was just a beast in the tournament last year, Klingon stepped up big. He's healthy again, and they just have players all the way throughout the court. And Danny Hurley's a great coach.
Yeah, they lost arguably their 3 best players from last year, and Andre Jackson, Jordan Hawkins, and Adama Sanogo, and they've just completely retooled. It's crazy to think that Donovan Klingon wasn't even starting on this team last year.
Yeah.
And then it's guys like Tristan Newton, the freshman Steven Castle, who stepped in and been great, and the transfer from Rutgers, Cam Spencer, he's done a great job. But a couple other things I want to highlight in this region. I think UConn and North Carolina in the same region at 1 and 2 would be very exciting. Iowa State, I think, should be a 2 seed. I think they should be in ahead of Kansas. They've been playing very well, 15-0 at home. They've been hot recently, and Wisconsin does not deserve to be in the top 16. They've lost 5 of their last 6. They play a very boring brand of basketball, and they're getting cold as the season goes on, which is not what you want.
You know what region I look at? Is that Arizona, Auburn, Kansas, and Duke one. That is stacked. I think that might be the most stacked region that we have in here in this bracket preview. I don't know who makes it out of there. I think that just makes up for really good basketball in that region. I don't know what you think about that, but I don't know. Can I trust Duke in the tournament? It feels like recently you haven't been able to. I know they got to the Elite Eight. That one year they lost to Carolina a couple of years ago, but I don't know. This Duke team is interesting. Kyle Filipowski, his draft stock has skyrocketed compared to last year. They got guys like Jared McCain, who just is a shooter. He makes a ton of threes, and even though you might think he's a little odd for making all those TikToks where he's gone viral, he has been excellent. He's an unbelievable basketball player. I don't know. I think this Duke team's really good, but in a region like that, it would be very tough.
Yeah, it's certainly a very loaded region. Auburn saw Jalen Williams go down yesterday. I don't know exactly what his injury was, but that's a huge loss. Auburn just suffered their first home loss of the season yesterday in a game against Kentucky where they just didn't look quite right. But them and Alabama, the other SEC team who's just came on surging in first place in the SEC, they just put up 100 yesterday, winning by 25. Their offense is just amazing. They score 100 like regularly, and Jalen Sears has just been like the Jalen Brunson of college basketball with the way he's able to get into the lane and make plays for other people. But going back to the West region, Kansas and Duke, it feels like their stock has been moved up because everyone knows them. They're the blue bloods of college basketball. Duke maybe not deserving that 3 seed in a weaker ACC this year where there's less opportunity for quad 1 wins and to beat good teams. But that I could see any four of those teams making out of that bracket, and I wouldn't be surprised. That would just be a complete pick 'em in all three games.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really know where to go with that one, but I look at Tennessee in the bracket with Purdue, San Diego State, and Baylor, and I think that's Tennessee's bracket if that would be the case. I like Dalton Connect a lot. They got Ziegler as well. So Tennessee's a team that has a lot of experience with that, and Dalton Connect is one of the best players in college basketball. It feels like he's been a lottery pick. He's been so good.
He'll be a first-team All-American for sure if he keeps playing like this.
Yeah, I've loved watching him, and he's just a player. He's really good, especially in this college game where in the tournament you need your guys to make threes and knock down shots. He's been there for every big moment for Tennessee. He's consistent. He's a shooter from beyond the arc, and I feel like he does it all. So I like Tennessee a lot in that bracket.
Yeah, and one of the good things that the transfer portal has brought us is guys from the mid-major who have been, microwaves and able to score, put the ball through the hoop. They get the opportunity to play at places where there's more recognition, like Max Asmus. He's been stuck at Oral Roberts forever, and now he gets to go play at Texas, where he's playing in the Big 12, matching up against these top 25 teams every other night. It's a lot more exciting, and it gives these guys the chance to improve their stock, not only if it's the NBA or if it's overseas or the G League or whatever it is, but they just get to be thrown under the spotlight instead of playing in the Summit League, and then they're thrown under March Madness one game a year and they lose, and that's all the spotlight they get. So that's one good thing that the transfer portal has brought. And I was a little surprised to see San Diego State in the top 16, but I think it shows the respect the committee has for the Mountain West, and a conference that recently has been going 3, 4, 5 teams deep, and this year it's going to be like the other years. They might even get 5 or 6 teams in this year. That conference goes very deep.
Yeah, and let's look at the conferences right now. Tell me what you take away from the ACC. We'll look at them first. That's the one that is near and dear to our hearts. But, Carolina sits at the top. You got Duke right behind them, and then you got Virginia there at the moment. And look at Pitt coming out of nowhere. They've got some big wins. They just beat a Virginia team who was ranked, and they beat Duke as well. So Pitt is beating two of those top 3 teams.
Both on the road.
Yeah, they've played really good basketball, but at the same time they've had some bad losses in the ACC. They're not a real consistent team, and I don't know. What do you think about the ACC right now?
Well, the ACC is a sad reality that we have to realize as fans is it's just not what it was 4 or 5 years ago, where the ACC was getting in 9, 10, maybe even 11 teams. It's getting to the point where the ACC is a 5, 6, maybe stretch it out to 7-team conference.
Right now it feels like 5.
Yeah, especially this year and last year, the only 3 ranked teams right now. Virginia lost this week. I think they'll stay in the rankings though. They played well the other night. You mentioned Pitt coming on. North Carolina, Duke, and Virginia are pretty much locks. NC State had a big win over Clemson last night. That one was in Clemson as well.
And those are the 2 other teams that are kind of fighting.
Yeah, Wake Forest is sort of on the bubble. I think Clemson is going to be in because of their non-conference schedule. They've done a great job, but usually, Florida State 7-7, even Syracuse at 7-8 in conference. Those are usually bubble teams, but when the ACC is this week, if you're not 3 or 4 games above 500, it's hard to see a path for you to get in.
Yeah, they're not. The ACC's not getting the respect that they've gotten before. I think you hit the nail right on the head with if Florida State and Syracuse were playing in the ACC from 5, 6 years ago, they'd look at that and they'd look at that conference record and they go, okay, they play in a really tough conference, the toughest in college basketball. 7-8's good, it's fine. That means they've gotten big wins against good teams in the ACC, and that is true. Florida State actually beat Syracuse. Syracuse just beat North Carolina. You look at that. Syracuse even beat Pitt twice, but it's the bad losses they have in there that the committee just says, if you're not like blowing out the really bad teams in the ACC, you don't get respect. And if you lose to the bad teams, like Syracuse just did to Georgia Tech, it's like resume pretty much gone. You're gonna have to win out and then win games in the ACC. So, or an ACC tournament. So there's that as a Syracuse fan perspective. It's like you see one team one night, and it's really a big difference between the dome and on the road, and that makes sense. It's sports. It's a home and away environment, but these bubble teams in the ACC that you would see from earlier years, like Florida State, around like Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, they're not getting the respect, and they're kind of in like the 60s and like 70 region, like in the net, all the way like up to 80.
Yeah, it's looking like maybe 5 or 6. We'll see if Wake or NC State can be that team. I do think Clemson's going to get in, but you mentioned just the struggle. When you play a North Carolina, Duke, and Virginia, it's sort of a must-win because those are like the 3 quad 1 wins you can get, big game wins you can get, and the other ones you're just trying not to slip up. Really, usually when you have a conference like the Big 12, pretty much every night is an opportunity to get a big win and boost your resume. In the ACC, you have such little opportunities, especially this year, that you have to win them. And then if you don't win them, it's hard to get that recognition you want. And then all of a sudden you lose one or two to the bottom feeders, and the committee just puts you in their back pocket and says, "All right, good luck next year."
Yeah, and then you look at the Big 12, like you just mentioned, and they're stacked. They have a million good teams. How many ranked teams do they have in there? That's like
They're sitting at 7, right?
yeah,
Six right now,
so
but
6 ranked teams. That means that other teams will get in as well, like Texas, and I don't know. They're loaded. They've gotten better, and a good West Virginia basketball program. It's just at the bottom, and they just haven't been good this year. But it's like yeah, they're just there's so many good teams in that conference.
yeah, in the new Big 12, Houston's going to be in the tournament. BYU will be a tournament team. UCF's had a couple of nice wins. They beat Kansas, but they're probably not going to make it. And then Cincinnati's sort of on the bubble at 5-7 in the conference. So they'll get 9 teams in. Could see a 10th or 11th with Cincinnati and Kansas State. They're both on the bubble. So if those two teams get a couple good wins, they could send 11 out of their 14 teams to the tournament. An absolutely ridiculous conference this year. They had Kansas, who was a champion, then they had Baylor, so they had those back-to-back champions before UConn won. Iowa State and Houston are playing very well. It's just sort of teams beating up on each other. That's why the conference records don't look that good. Oklahoma probably won't be ranked after this week. Both right now they're ranked and they're 6-7 in the conference. This is what we were seeing from the ACC is now turned into the Big 12, and that's why they're going to send double-digit teams to March Madness.
Yeah, it feels like the ACC from a little bit ago. And I look at the Big East, and I think there's a strong comparison between the Big East and the ACC, actually. I think they're very similar. If anything, I actually think the Big East is doing better. Obviously, they have less teams, but you look at Connecticut, they're the best team in the country. Marquette, who's a very good team as well, who just lost to the best team in the country by a lot. Creighton just seems to always sit in that 15 to 25 number being ranked in the country, and that's a good thing for your basketball program. That's what you want. That's where you want to be. You want to be up there, get some big wins, and then try to make it in the top 10, right? But they struggled in the tournament last year. They didn't do the best, like up to their expectations. And Seton Hall, led by Kadari Richmond, he's been a very good basketball player for them. He's a great point guard. Seton Hall is probably in the tournament right now, and so you're looking at 4, maybe 5. I don't know about Villanova this year. They're still feeling that loss of Jay Wright. It feels like to me. You lose a dynasty in him, and you lose an unbelievable coach, a Hall of Fame coach. It's hard for your basketball program to recover quickly. We'll see what happens with Villanova in the future, but the Big East and the ACC are kind of similar to me.
Yeah, you mentioned Creighton just sitting in that range. Creighton's one of those teams where can we just rank them somewhere in that range and just keep them there because they're gonna win a couple games to get higher, and then they're gonna fall back. They're gonna lose a couple games, and they're gonna win 1 or 2.
It's been the same thing for like 5 years.
We're just bouncing them around. They could just settle on one spot, but no, UConn just the one conference loss. Marquette and Creighton are pretty much locks. The one thing that blows my mind is the fact that coming into today, Seton Hall was on the bubble. I think they were the first 4 out,
I think
which
they're
makes absolutely no sense to me because they're 10-5 in a good Big East conference. They beat UConn by 15.
in. Yeah.
UConn has 2 losses. One of them was in Allen Fieldhouse by 4, and the other was at Seton Hall by 15.
And is this another example of a conference not getting the respect of other conferences where you see like the teams in the Big 12, like a 5-7 team, they're in?
Seton Hall was 9-5, and St. John's was 6-8. They were playing today, and they were in the same spot.
Yeah.
And St. John's lost, who I guess is still on the bubble. I think
St. John's is on the bubble?
they were. The
How?
committee had them
That's
close. Their Seton Hall should be way past them, especially with if you're gonna say that UConn's far and away the best team, you have to give Seton Hall the respect of beating them. And then you have Providence, Villanova, Xavier Butler, St. John's grouped up in that middle. I think 2 or 3 of those 5 teams gets in.
And then Georgetown.
Whichever one
Paul.
can make a little run maybe in the Big East tournament. And that's the weirdest part about this conference is there's just 2 absolute bottom
They're
feeders.
awful. They're terrible. They're one of the worst 2 teams in the
DePaul's
country.
3-22, 0-14 in the conference. Georgetown 8-17, 1-13 in the conference because they played DePaul and they beat them.
Yeah.
So one of them had to win. So it's a knife fight between the 9 other teams, and then you play these 2 teams, and it's an automatic win. So take those wins with a grain of salt, as you will.
And then the Big Ten. We look at the Big Ten before we look at the SEC. And the Big Ten is led by Purdue. But I think the big question with Purdue is obviously they got upset by that 16 seed in FDU last year. And they're so reliant on Zach Edey. That's the problem that I have with Purdue. when you're so reliant on one player, it just feels like if he's going to have an off night, your team's done. Your team's not going to do so well. Your team's screwed. And I think that's a really troubling thing to have. I don't know how you feel about it, Garrett, but the Big Ten isn't really that great this year. They haven't been that good. Ohio State, one of the worst teams in the conference, just got a huge win over Purdue, like we mentioned earlier. And Michigan, who's been pretty good, has been awful. So in recent years, they've been terrible. Um, Iowa isn't what they've been in recent years as well, and Illinois is up there with Wisconsin. You're not high on Wisconsin, I know that, but the Big Ten hasn't been that good this year.
I'm not high in the Big Ten as a whole. I don't really like Purdue. I don't dislike the team at all. The committee gives them way too much respect for me. You have to win 6 games to win March Madness and be crowned the national champion. Purdue's due to have an off shooting night one of those games.
And if Zach Edey has an off night, it's over.
They had an off shooting day today, and they lost to Ohio State, who's in 13th place out of 14 teams. Wisconsin's playing bad ball right now. Michigan State's, they're going to make the tournament, but they're severely under what we thought they were going to be. This is a conference I just think the committee gives too much respect to, and they try to force 6 or 7 of those teams by putting a team like Iowa, Minnesota, even Rutgers coming into today before they lost to Minnesota was sort of labeled as like the next 4 out. I'd just like to see a different conference maybe get a second team in or a third or fourth team in if it's a smaller one of those mid-major conferences instead of giving the Big Ten 7 or 8 teams like they love to do. It's just 2 of the top teams in Purdue and Wisconsin, I believe, are very overrated. Illinois, Terrence Shannon coming back has just saved their season because of how dynamic he is. He had, I think, almost 40 yesterday. But to me, we love the statue and all the just legacy that the Big Ten has built, but
I
got to see it for what it is. This is not a conference that should have 7 or 8 teams in it.
This is a conference that if you've picked them in your bracket in years past has been awful for you. Your bracket has been busted if you've done what I've done. I have zero respect for the Big Ten. This year, I'm not going to pick them to go far in any of my brackets. Purdue, complete disappointment last year. Michigan State always seems to find a way to get upset in the tournament as well. They're probably not going to be in one of those higher seeds this year, but you just look at the Big Ten and I say they always underperform. Iowa with a huge disappointment a couple years ago. It just feels like it always happens, and I can't really seem to understand it.
Yeah, it's such a conference that just feels like
They underperform.
they're really rich and they're money driven, and now they're expanding to the West Coast, and it just feels like they want all this attention and respect where they really shouldn't get it. And you mentioned the lack of success. As bad as the ACC's been the last 2
They
years.
do good in the tournament.
North Carolina and Duke were in the Final Four 2 years ago. Even Miami went to the Final Four last year. The ACC wins games in the tournament. And when you have a trend like that going, if I'm the committee and I'm trying to decide between an ACC and a Big Ten team, I'm leaning towards the ACC team.
But the committee, for whatever reason, they love the Big Ten in the regular season, but then they just never perform in the postseason because they're playing against each other. That's why they don't realize that they're playing against each other and there's 2 bad teams. They're not actually that good, and then it's just they get this over respect that they don't deserve.
Yeah, we saw Illinois lose in the round of 32 when they were a 1 seed 2 or 3 years ago, I think, and then Purdue the second time.
Oh yeah, that
1
Illinois
seed.
team that was
Iota Sumu, Kofi Coburn.
Coburn.
They
That
had
was my guy.
really good team. And then Purdue getting upset in the first round last year. It's just they seem to not have a ton of success. The style of ball they play just doesn't really translate. Look at the Mountain West Conference.
Okay.
A very emerging conference in the last couple of years. They're going to get 5, maybe even 6 teams in. We saw San Diego State mentioned in the top 16. Utah State going to be in the tournament. Colorado State going to be in the tournament. And then Boise State, New Mexico, as long as they can win a couple more conference games, they should be in. And even Nevada is probably going to be given some consideration. So the Mountain West, a very interesting conference, probably even better than the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah, the Conference of Champions, as Bill Walton likes to call it, hasn't really been that. It's been a disappointing season from a lot of teams, especially like UCLA. They started off, I think, ranked, and they just have not been good. We watched them lose just now in a kind of disappointing fashion as well. But it's led by Arizona at the top in the Pac-12, and it's Washington State and then everybody else.
Yeah, Washington State, what a season they've had, though. Props to them.
Oregon hasn't been terrible either.
Yeah, they've been
okay.
solid. They could sneak in the tournament. I think UCLA needed a win tonight. They didn't get one. If they make a run in the Pac-12 tournament, I guess they could sneak in. The
I don't
problem
see it.
the problem is there's just not really good wins in the Pac-12. Arizona's your only good chance for a good win. I guess if you beat Washington State, that's another one. But the Mountain West has been the better conference in the Pac-12, and Bill Walton's Conference of Champions, it's going to be disbanding after this year. In football, it felt like it was their year. It was the last year of the Pac-12. There's a lot of energy around it, and now it just sort of feels like in basketball, can we get the Pac-12 out of here? Because I don't know about you, but I don't really want to watch many of these teams play.
No, it's not fun basketball to watch. It's not the best. We all know the scene's going to be shaken up dramatically soon. So it's like, what's the point of even talking about them? They're not that interesting. But I think something that's really interesting is the SEC. They're going to grow a lot. We know that. They're already this powerhouse conference in football, and they've just gotten better and better at basketball every year. It feels like, and you know, they're the team. They're the conference now where it's like they just want to have this great success in all sports. It was for so long, Garrett. It was about, oh, we want to be so good in football, have all this surrounded about football, 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 and they said all of a sudden the program's changed and it's been basketball and it's been Alabama actually leading the way a lot of the years. It feels like in this new basketball surge led SEC conference.
Yeah, the SEC is going to be right around that 6-7 mark. Alabama, Tennessee, and Auburn all getting nods in the top 16. South Carolina was 21-3 coming into this week, slid all the way up to 11th. Then they get piss pounded by at Auburn, lose by 40 in that one, and then they drop another bad one to LSU at home over the weekend. So they might fall all the way back out of the rankings, but they should be in the tournament. And Florida's been playing very well, and probably one of the most talented teams in the country is the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yes. Per usual.
They have all these 5-star freshmen as they do every year. It takes them a while, to get going, but I think it's time John Calipari needs to take this Kentucky team on another deep run in March.
Yeah, I think it is time for that because it's been a little bit for Kentucky, but this is a great conference. I think Tennessee's probably the best team in the conference in my mind, and this sets us up for a really exciting March as always. It's like you can't underplay it. Everything that you expect is the unexpected. Everything that you want it just doesn't happen. It's the opposite of what you think. And it's like the best. It's the best tournament in all of sports, in my opinion. You can't predict it. That's why perfect brackets have never happened, and no one's ever gotten them
due
all
for
correct.
one this year.
We'll see how we do. We'll follow along the way. If we have a perfect bracket, even in the first round, I'll be shocked. But it's fun to watch. Now the thing that's interesting that you have to track, and I've gotten this before. I got all perfect picks in like the first. I did really good in the women's bracket last year, and I was able to get like
less upsets.
Yeah, I just picked there is less upsets in their sport, but you can get if you get one region correct, that'd be something we'd have to look into. Like how rare and how efficient can you be in getting a region correct? I don't know. That we could look at that and try to do
both
that.
of our teams should be in the women's tournament, so
Yeah, Syracuse women's basketball, big win today.
More entertaining for
great team
for our teams. They should be playing there.
Ranked team.
Probably hosting even as the women's teams do in the first couple of rounds. But you mentioned it's the best tournament in all of sports. It just is. I don't care what your favorite sport is. You have to admit it. There's just nothing like March Madness. The fact that
Who doesn't like it?
The fact that you lose one game and you're out, and all these Cinderella teams can just make runs and build their program up like what FAU did last year. All of a sudden, they're on the whole country's radar this year.
They've been on the brink of They lost tonight. They lost today. Excuse me, to a UCF team. That was a good game.
Very hot UCF team who's probably going to be in the tournament as well. But
yeah, if you want a little dark horse candidate, UCF. Watch them today. USF.
Yeah, get those two mixed up a lot.
Yeah,
UCF
University of South Florida, the Bulls, the Green Bulls.
UCF in the Big 12 now.
The Green Bulls.
When you think back of college basketball, and how many March Madness legends do you think of? You think of Dougie Edert. Think of guys like Aaron Kraft at Ohio State. Maybe London Parentes.
London
Virginia.
London Parentes, a guy who played for 28 years.
Cassius Winston at Michigan State. Even Adam Morrison at Gonzaga. Someone like Drew Timme. How weird is it going to be to not see Drew Timme?
Someone like Sister
March
Jean.
Madness.
Oh, Sister Jean.
Sister Jean, you got to mention her. They're having a nice season in the A10 in the top 3, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, Chicago can make another run.
You don't want to pick them though because the Ramblers had their run. They had it. I don't think they're due for one. You got to find the team, and that's what makes it so hard. There's always a team. It was Oral Roberts a couple of years ago. It was FDU. It was everybody. It was St. Peter's. it just is everybody. It always happens. You can't find it. It used to happen a lot less. It feels like 2-15s have been a big upset recently, and especially the 1-16. Ever since UMBC did it to Virginia, it's like
I think it's
it
going to
can
keep
happen.
getting bigger, even with NIL and the transfer
The
portals.
transfer portals, yeah.
Talent's just spreading out more and more.
It should be fun, Garrett.
I'm looking forward to it.
So we actually have a interview tomorrow with Kyle Yeomans. He works for the Dallas Cowboys, a pre and post guy. He actually called the Cowboys Seahawks game this year. Cool story around that. If you want to find out more about that, tune into Finger Lakes 1 tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It'll be fun. We look forward to it yet again.
Yeah, should be a great experience.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We're signing off.